Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Rebor release. We finally have the Tyrannosaurus Rex, aka the new versions of the V-Rex from Rebor released. And before I even want to get too far into the video, I want to state where I got these from, because I often wonder if you guys make it to the end of the video to find out where I actually acquire the figures. But I did want to state that I got these through Happy Hen Toys, and the reason I wanted to tell you that right away is because I feel like that is such an underrated website that really deserves more attention. It is a fantastic place to purchase dinosaur figures, and as you can see, the newest Rebor products, obviously. So check out Happy Hen Toys, especially if you are intending on grabbing these guys. That is an absolutely excellent place to get a hold of them. So again, I will include a link in the description directly to these figures on Happy Hen Toys, but you can also check out all the other stuff in there, especially when they have their really cool clearance sales and stuff. You can get some excellent figures for a really nice price. As far as what we have on the box, you can see it's just your standard black box, pretty much like the classic Rebor look for the box. You can also see a shot of the V-Rex. Then we have the Rebor logo, and up here Tyrannosaurus Rex Cream Mountain Scale 1/35th, and you can see the other one is Skullwalker as opposed to Mountain. So obviously two different paint variants. And then on the back of the box, you can see just an advertisement for the other one, again also available. So if you only grab one, you'll then know that there are in fact two different color variants for this release. So let's pop this box open and check it out. So first of all, inside the packaging, we actually have these two little baggies, of course one baggie for each box. That does include a stand, and you can get a look at the stand in case you have any stability issues with your figure in the future or even in the present, but I don't usually see them having standing issues right out of the box. But you can see a pretty nice looking clear stand that would definitely be convenient to have if the figures again do start to have any standing issues. And then we've got our V-Rex themselves, and as you can see, instantly, I can tell you, it definitely has some pretty significant weight to it. It has that very high quality Rebor feel to the figure, of course, the look and feel, but it is an absolutely gorgeous looking version of a V-Rex. And then, of course, we have the other color variant here as well, which you can see is more of almost like a Dinosaur Revolution style paint variant, where we have kind of like the look of the T-Rex from Dinosaur Revolution. And I think they both honestly look phenomenal here, and they look really cool next to each other. I would love to see, it also kind of has like that skull crawler kind of look as well as far as the coloration goes. But again, they absolutely look awesome. Two super cool looking V-Rex, and again, they make one incredible pair. I would love to actually see that color variant actually make an appearance in a movie. Heck, I'd love to just in general see the V-Rex come back at any point for any film, because again, we have only seen it in the Peter Jackson King Kong film. I would love to see it return, because at this point it's pretty obvious that it is super iconic. It's definitely a fan favorite. But if we go ahead, we'll actually remove this one here. We'll move this one off to the side as it opens its mouth and actually bites me. And then we'll bring in the standard color variant for the V-Rex to get our closer look. So first of all, when we start here in the head sculpt, you can see the head sculpt is beyond impressive. Rebor definitely did a great job on the fine detail, and you can see that here through the course of the figure. You've got all sorts of variation to the sizes of the scales, and it looks extremely, extremely impressive. You can very clearly see they put their all into sculpting this one out. We also have pretty much your standard gray tone that you usually see on a V-Rex, but we also have a light wash that creeps in and out of each and every scale, perfectly highlighting the skin texture, the skin detail, and just in general giving it a very lifelike and realistic look. The eyes are painted. They're very small. You can see they also have a nice gloss coat to them. They are perfectly applied, which you can see there's zero sloppiness to the paintwork of the eyes. We also have this nice kind of like a brownish tone that sort of runs along the jawline, which I think is really nice. Definitely looks good and also adds a nice element of realism to the figure. Obviously, it currently has its mouth closed, but we do have an articulated jaw, which is always fun. You can see the teeth on the inside of the mouth look extremely realistic. Rebor has had quite the history of providing some of the most realistic looking teeth on their models. You see the same case again for our V-Rex here, our Tyrannosaurus. You can see the skin stretching here here on the inside of the mouth as well. If my camera, there we go, would focus. Painted with like a light brown, given a dark wash in there. And you can, of course, see the tongue. And if we turn the figure and get a look at the tongue, first of all, the texturing is fantastic. You have a nice realistic pinkish tone in there, as well as a red wash, helping to highlight every ounce of detail on that tongue. And then if you look at the inside of the mouth on the upper side, man, that is gorgeous. You can again see realism for days in there, whether it be the sculpt or the paint, as well as the gloss coat, and the fact that it almost looks like we have an actual throat back there. That is definitely one extremely impressive area of this figure. And as you can see, first of all, the jaw closes perfectly, but we also have that almost sort of interlocking look to the teeth of the V-Rex, which you can see again. They have that very hectic look to them, and you can definitely see that on this figure as well. All sorts of like different positioning for the teeth as you move around the figure. It looks honestly awesome. And when you look over here on this side of the head, you'll notice that there is actually an injury, like a slice that leads down from the eye a little ways, and they have painted that out and given it a gloss coat, which definitely looks really good. But the detail honestly is fantastic on this figure. You can see up here on the top of the head, again, that very armored style to the skin texture of the V-Rex, and of course the same paintwork with the grayish tones and the wash. And as you move back, you continue to see how darn good of a job they've done of highlighting all of the detail with that wash. We also continue to have that very armored look to the back of the dinosaur with the very armored scoots moving along, kind of crocodilian looking. And then leading down here, you can see a little variation, I think, to the grayish tones. And again, that wash absolutely doing its job perfectly. On the underbelly of the V-Rex, you can see a light tone, but they've applied a wash down here as well, a dark wash, which helps to highlight the detail down here perfectly. So Rebor very clearly knew what they were doing when it comes to the sculpt and paint of this one. They definitely hammered out one incredible looking version of a V-Rex. We still have those very large armored scoots moving along the back, but again, as we lead down here, we get quite impressive, very vibrant scale detail, and you can see tons of variation to the shapes and sizes of the scales. You can also see how perfectly the coloration transitions from the grays with the light wash to the browns with the dark wash. Like, there is zero sloppiness when it comes to that paintwork. As you lead down into the body a little further, you can see the arms down here, very nicely sculpted. We actually have articulated arms, although they are definitely stiff straight out of the packaging, but obviously you can move the arms out if you want to have them out or held more into the body like they just were a moment ago, which I feel like is a little more natural. But leading down, you can see even a little variation of color through the course of the arm. You can see the muscle definition, the elbow and everything sculpted out. And when we lead around to the front, even though this is technically more of like a V-Rex, it is labeled as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So as you can see, we do have two fingers for the figure, although if this were an extremely accurate V-Rex, it technically should have three fingers. There's like a one smaller finger that kind of leads off to the side that is lacking on the Rebor version, but you can see the nails are painted pretty nicely as well. No sloppiness there either, but again, you can articulate the arms and put them back into the body. They can also continue to go out pretty far, so basically just forward and back. You can get pretty much whatever position I think that you would want for the V-Rex. But as you lead back into the stomach, again, you've got a nice shot on this side as well of the extremely natural and smooth transition, as well as the incredibly impressive sculpt work. You can also see some skin wrinkles and stuff running down along the front of the thigh. As you lead up, you've got the spinal column following along the back, of course, like kind of highlighted moving along the back of the figure. You can also see the hip bone here kind of protruding through the skin. And again, the paintwork, if my camera would focus correctly, continues to have that really nice light wash everywhere. Leading down into the thigh, you can see the thigh definitely has some very impressive muscle definition, as well as, again, very impressive scale detail, all sorts of variation. Like even from here to here to here, like everywhere, it just has different styles to the scales, showing that Rebor really went all out when it comes to the sculpt of this V-Rex. As you lead down, you can see the knee. You can also kind of see a little seam where the leg was connected, but that at the same time kind of looks like skin wrinkling there for the crease of the knee, so it doesn't really stand out to me as being a very obvious seam for the most part anyway. I mean, it's very obvious to see it, but it doesn't obviously look like a seam to me. It kind of looks like creasing in the knee at the same time. But as you lead down, you can see a nice big bulging calf muscle, and again, even right here to here. Like, they've done a great job of using the washes on both sides without making the two kind of intertwine. They've done a very good job of keeping those washes separate on the different tones of color. And then as you move down into the foot sculpt, you have some very nice armored scoots moving along the front of the foot down into the toes. You also continue to have that light wash moving down there in between the toes, but a brownish tone following along those scoots. And then we lead down into the nails, and the nails have a nice genuine sharp look to them. They also have a bit of a dry brushing over them to even give the nails a little variation of color. Look at that paintwork. That is super, super nicely done. And as you lead back up, you do have a seam here where the tail connects, because the tail is disconnected when you first get it, and you have to pop the tails in on both figures. And then we lead out into the tail, and you can see you have like some darker browns following along here that sort of like lead down a little bit. We also have the lighter tone moving along the underside. Again, looks like on top of the wash, maybe even a little dry brushing added down there. But then we also have, again, the grayish tones with the light wash moving along the upper side, and all sorts of quite nicely armored scales, very different looking from here to here. Again, showing the variation of color through the course of the figure. As you lead out, you can see you have a pretty cool looking end to the tail here with like a slight line of ridges sort of moving along the top of the tail. And we do also have the ability to sort of move and articulate the tail. I believe it's a wire tail. Yeah, definitely staying in place. So always fun to have that. As you move along the underside, you can see the detailing and everything looks great. The paintwork, again, looks great down here as well. They definitely did a fantastic job as far as that goes. And then over here, you can see the V-Rex now has its head turned away from us. You definitely have a really obvious turn and even a little tilt to the head and neck area of the V-Rex as you move down. For the most part, it's going to look the same over here. Of course, the positioning of the arm is dependent on where you put it, so you can change it and move it out or keep it back the way it is. Leading up, you again see the same paintwork and everything as you see on the other side. The biggest difference over here would be the positioning of the leg, and how the leg is obviously taking a pretty nice step forward as the V-Rex kind of comes in, looking quite intimidating, I must say. But again, the paintwork, the sculpt work, everything on this is phenomenal. They really, really did a great job on this V-Rex, definitely creating one of the best versions of a V-Rex that I have ever seen. The only thing missing, in my opinion, is that third finger. And then we have the other color variant, again, the more Dinosaur Revolution or Skull Crawler variant, however you want to look at it, because it kind of looks like a mixture of both. But if you start here in the face, I believe the sculpts are the same, so there's no real difference between the two different V-Rex. They're strictly color variants. But if you start here in the face, you can see that we have like a nice dark wash with a lighter tone, kind of like a sort of like an off-white that runs through the face of the V-Rex. And then again, that dark wash continuing to help highlight the detail perfectly, as you can see, really highlighting the scale detail exactly as you would want it to. You can see the nostrils, which as well are highlighted with that darker tone. There's like a little random black spot right there, and then some darker tones as you move back here into the body, almost like darker grays or browns. Again, one thing that you might expect is when you have a dark wash at play, you would almost expect darker colors like this to kind of mesh too much with it and not look as obvious, but whatever colors they've applied them perfectly to where the dark wash still helps to highlight the detail, even in the darker areas. And you can see the same here for the underbelly. The underbelly is a little bit of a lighter tone, but nowhere near as light as we saw on the first version of the V-Rex. Obviously, we again have an articulated jaw. The teeth look absolutely as realistic as it gets when it comes to the sculpting and the painting, as well as the material used, and also the fact that they again have that very nice, impressive gloss coat to it. You can also see the skin here. Once you open the mouth, the skin's stretching. Now it's painted actually with the pinkish tone that we see there for the tongue, looking very realistic, honestly, as lifelike as it could possibly get. We could see the tongue there again. There obviously is a wash applied, like a reddish wash. And then the detail here on the upper side of the inside of the mouth as well. It looks phenomenal as far as that goes. We also have, of course, those very small eyes painted, this time with what appears to be kind of like a goldish tone, but again, they are perfectly painted, no sloppiness at all. As we move back into the body, you see that lighter tone follow along the top of the dinosaur and also stripe down with like some small stripes. You continue to see that as you lead back. Even here, you continue to see those stripes again leading down into the side of the body. But then we have the darker tones, kind of like a dark gray or a dark brown for the majority of the body. But then once it's hit with that dark wash, it really blends into like a very dark kind of black sort of a look. You can see the transition here where we get to that slightly lighter tone of color. But again, the coloration for the most part through the entire figure is fairly dark, but it is a really smooth transition. We again, of course, have the articulated arms, super stiff because again, I haven't moved them, but leading down, you see a little variation of color to the arms, and the nails are painted with a lighter tone, this time like a light brown. And then as we move down, you can also see the dew claw is painted, which is something that I think I failed to mention when we were taking a look at the legs of the other version. But as you lead up, you continue to have the striping effect, but as you lead down, you have like this light tone basically overtaking the back, and once you reach the hip region, it breaks up into a striping effect leading out, and you can see pretty big stripes here above the hip, but once you lead out into the tail, they become really quite small, and for the most part, they end right here, but then they reappear out here toward the end of the tail, and then leading down, you again have that slightly lighter tone moving along the back of the legs, and then the darker tones moving along the front of the legs. You again have the nails painted just like we saw in the hands with the brownish tone. There is actually a dark wash even to the nails, which helps to really highlight that detail in that area as well quite perfectly. And again, leading out into the tail, there's not much when it comes to flashiness on this one. Kind of like the other one didn't really have flashiness either, but this one, for the most part, is really quite dark tones of color. We do have the injury there in the eye, just like we saw on the other one, again painted out with a reddish tone or like a very dark red, and then given a gloss coat, which helps to add some nice realism to the figure. But moving back into the body again, it pretty much looks the same over here as it did on the first side. You're not really going to notice much of any sort of difference between the two different sides for the figure. So again, another absolutely phenomenal version of a V-Rex, and although it looks like it's wobbling a little bit as I set it down, it does stand pretty nicely. As far as a size goes, as I already stated, they are definitely quite sizable. So for a length, you are looking at about 17¼ inches, or right around 43½, closing in on 44 centimeters, but not quite there. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A human being next to our V-Rex from Rebor, and as you can see, it's definitely pretty big, and even though, you know, the head sculpts are almost sort of similar in size between Mr. Papo Rex and the V-Rex, with just a bit more bulkiness on the V-Rex, obviously the Rebor V-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex, whatever you'd like to call it, has a good bit more size on the Papo T-Rex. And then in a pretty interesting comparison, we have the new Rebor V-Rex next to the old Rebor V-Rex, and as you can see, they have a very different look on them, significantly different compared to the older version of this dinosaur that Rebor had released. But you'll also notice that, again, the size is fairly similar, very different pose, with the older one being, I would say, maybe slightly smaller, but overall fairly similar in size. Then we've got a comparison next to the Nanmu V-Rex, which you can see as well is extremely similar in size to the Rebor versions. So if you happen to have all of these different V-Rex figures, you'll have yourself one incredibly cool diorama, especially considering, again, they are all pretty much in the same scale. And you'll pretty much continue to see the same thing if you bring in the more recent Smart Series release of the V-Rex from Nanmu as well. Again, pretty much right there in the same similar size range. And then finally, if we bring in one of the Playmates V-Rex, you can see that obviously this version is a lot smaller. This is that kind of retractable version where you can release the limbs and the head and the tail and everything, but overall, again, a much smaller version of the V-Rex. If you had the larger version that was released in that line, I think you might have a more similar sized version to this. So honestly, Rebor absolutely knocked this one out of the park with only one issue to the figure, and that would be the number of digits on the hands being incorrect. But outside of that, I feel like looking at the figure, it is absolutely gorgeous from head to tail. It is one of the nicest looking Rebor releases that they have had in quite some time. And I feel like as of late, Rebor just continues to impress me with the increase in quality of their products. They've always had pretty high quality products, but I feel like they've just been getting better and better. And specifically, the thing that I think has been improving the most would be their paint apps. They just seem to be getting more lifelike and realistic as time goes on. They're just putting more effort into making sure the paint jobs are as top-notch and as close to the prototypes as possible. And you can really see that paying off in the final product, especially when it comes to these two. Sculpt-wise, they are fantastic, sporting insanely impressive detail. Like, by far one of the nicest sculpted figures that I've ever seen from Rebor, and they've done an excellent job of bringing out all of the detail with the paint apps, especially when it comes to the washes that they've used, which is something that I personally always feel like is, a very important aspect to figures. If you're not going to use like some form of dry brushing or something to really help highlight the detail, a wash, it would actually probably be my first choice. Like, I would always say washes just help add so much realism to figures, and you can really see that they've done that and utilized that perfectly with both different variants of the V-Rex here. I also love the fact that we have articulation on these, at least a little bit, as you have articulated jaws and articulated arms, helping to give you a little bit of posability with the figure. And of course, you also have articulation in the tail with the wire tail, which helps to add even more posability. Without a doubt, though, these are excellent figures from Rebor, and as I said earlier in the review, I highly recommend you picking them up from Happy Hen Toys, because that, as I said, is where I got mine, and again, is an incredibly underrated website. If you're not even interested in picking these up, just go check out their site. Go check out all of the incredible products they have to offer from all of the brands you know and love. So one way or another, I highly recommend these figures. Of course, make sure you pick them up if you want them, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.